All right, guys, I put it off for long enough. People have been asking for it, and I've been putting it off. So yeah, it's a Lorcana episode. The whole point of Steelfur Scouts, right? This little playlist that I do is that we're here to talk about new card games. Disney announces a new card game. How can I not talk about it, right? So we've got these cards here. We've got an idea of what they all do. There are some very basic ideas going on here in terms of let's get a better image. In terms of card design, that is not a good image. Right, let's just find our way to a better image. Okay, there should be one around here somewhere. Open image, new tab. Jesus Christ, guys, come on! Can't even spoil your own card game. Right, okay. An image with some of the cards on. Right, so essentially we've got this. So in my mind, instantly this is already like magic. Okay, we're going to pick apart the design elements so we can see. Everything has a cost. We don't know how that cost is going to be paid yet, but there are some leaks that I will address in a minute. But everything just has this cost. Everything has a power and toughness. Everything has, that those are the stats on the card, right? Cost, power, and toughness. Already we're seeing magic very similar. We see abilities to banish characters. We see abilities to stop characters being attacked, evasive, and we see abilities like Challenger, which gives it a bonus when it's challenging a character, right? So already we're sort of building up a framework where I'm going to summon a board of these characters. Those characters are then going to be on the board, basically tapping, exerting to do certain things, probably to attack my opponent's characters. And then we kind of need to figure out what is happening next, right? So there are two main questions that you have when you're looking at sort of a Disney game, right? The first one is it going to have some sort of character like based prize system like Pokemon, for example, where by knocking out my opponent's characters, I get prizes. If I get enough prizes, then I win, right? Or is it a case of, I have to attack my opponent in some way, right? And that's actually a very, very interesting question because Disney potentially aren't going to want to give people life totals. Now, it could be something functionally equivalent to life that is not actually a life total, but Disney aren't going to want to give you a hero with a life total, right? Because they're not going to want to have Elsa chipping down someone's life total, right? I bet what's going to go on here is they're going to call it something like Fate or, magic or something like that, where it's an essence that you're essentially fighting over. Because we can kind of see from Elsa's flavor text, one of the reasons I wanted to bring Elsa up specifically is that it says recreated by magical ink. Elsa found herself in a new familiar new world. Unfortunately, ice works the same everywhere. This to me kind of implies that all these Disney characters, story-wise, are going to be pulled into this magical world where they're recreated by magical ink into a sort of storybook context, and that context will lead them to fight each other either to get back to their own world or for some sort of, control or to protect the people that are there, right? And in that way, you'll have heroes challenging villains in order to get some advantage. Now, there may be a sort of, Game of Thrones TCG like power system whereby every challenge that you win gets you a power token or a resource, and maybe this symbol here might be the amount of power you get for either defeating it or for winning with it. It would be very interesting if this is the amount you get for defeating it, right? So Robin Hood has 2 because he's got evasive. This has 1 because it's very low. We see Stitch is a 3/5 but has 3 pips. So we'll have to figure out what that means later on. But at a basic level, we're looking at a champion-based board control style game where these heroes fight off. Now, it's Disney. It's probably going to be very successful. Everyone loves the Disney IP. Disney have not done a TCG so far as I know. you know, but that's what you can do. So the only thing really that we get added to this, because there have been a few other leaks that I just want to bring up on the screen. So the first thing to note is that these colors are not called colors. They are called ink types, which kind of again fits our storybook theme. This is a leak from a trade show, so you can kind of see it's a bit thing. You know, amber, emerald, sapphire, amethyst, ruby, and steel. I don't personally like it when companies do this and try and make people use fancy names for these kind of things. People are going to call them green, red, purple, blue, grey, and green. Like, they're just going to do that, especially kids are. So, you know, it's pretty cool having them called these different gems, and hopefully there's a reason for it. But ultimately, I think people are just going to use the colors. I know you don't want to be considered to be like Magic. You don't want green, white, red, blue, black, you know, but people are going to use the colors, but that's okay. So we see these people clearly divided into certain colors. What does that mean? So from the same source as these leaks has come the leak of the resource systems. Let's just bring this up. Well, actually, I'll just read it to you guys. So your inkwell, now whether this is true or not, this is the leak, is 15 ink pot cards of your selection, so they're probably going to be colors, ink colors, shuffled and placed opposite your archive. So archive is going to be your deck. The first player to act places one of these cards into play during their refill phase. Each subsequent turn, the active player places 2 of these cards into play. Costs are played by exerting ink pot cards to generate ink and must be paid with at least 1 ink of a matching color. Right, so let's break down what this tells us, because this actually tells us quite a lot if it's true. And I mean, it could very well be true because we've used the word ink several times in the leaks that we've seen. So it could very well be true, but let's assume it's true. So the Inkwell is essentially a separate land deck, just for those Magic players out there, that is separate from your deck. So it solves the problem of lands in deck and you drawing one every turn or not drawing one every turn that Magic the Gathering has. It's actually quite a good solution to that because you will get a land every single turn, but you also don't necessarily have 100% control over the color of that land if you're playing a multicolor deck. So it does add a little bit of the land variance back in, which a lot of people will enjoy. Now, we take that concept of I'm going to draw 1 land every turn, and sorry, you actually get 2 lands every turn, don't you? So you start off with 1 person getting 1 land, and then you accelerate by 2 pieces every game, which means that our lovely Maleficent, who's a 9 cost, is actually a turn 4 play, or a turn... Let's just do quick maths here. I go first, I place 1 on. Then on turn 5, I will have 9 resources. You go second, you place 2. So she's a turn 5 play. Elsa is a turn 2 play. And Captain Hook, assumedly, you're playing with something else, right? So you're playing it alongside another cheap person who's going to get you some more advantage. So you might play Captain Hook and Cruella de Vil at the same time, right? So that's the resource system. Now, so that's basically every turn you're taking 1 card from your ink pot deck. It has to contain the colors that are in your deck because you have to generate the ink. You could probably play a 5-color deck, but you might not draw the color you need at the right time. But once you have drawn the color, you can then play the card with the color pretty easily. There's no dual... we haven't seen any dual colors yet. They may exist. We haven't seen any dual color cards. But they may exist, so you might need 2 different colors of ink. Obviously, you can't play 2 green cards if you've only got 1 green... and 1 green ink card and 1 green, like 2 green cards to play. So you have to have more green if you want to build a green heavy deck. That kind of makes a lot of sense. We're also being told through this leak that players are going to... Well, actually, we're not told this, but we can kind of infer it, right? So every game has an active and a non-active player. Well, not every game. Some games have 2 active players, but usually games have active and non-active players, right? So this says the first player to act places 1 of these cards into play during their refill phase. But it's interesting that the wording isn't the player who goes first or the player who has the first turn. It's the player who has the first player to act. Now, I've kind of said that if we're taking inspiration from our Hearthstones, from our... maybe not Hearthstone. What am I thinking of? If we're taking inspiration from something like Ashes Reborn, The players have and this is a very modern piece of design, the players have a dual turn where I go first and I'm the first player to act. But that does not mean that I am the only player to act on my turn. So, for example, in Ashes Reborn, if I challenge one of my opponent's characters, my opponent can also then just challenge my character. And we go back and forth until we are both happy and have done as much as we can. And then the active player passes to me, and I become the first player to act, right? So here is a question. Like, how is this going? So I play first. I refill my ink pot by 1. I do something with it. Then I pass to my opponent. He places 2 of those cards into his ink pot, and then plays a card. And then do I have a chance to respond, maybe? Or does it pass back to me? And then I play 2 more resources and play a 3rd card, and then maybe I can attack. Does my opponent then get to counterattack on his turn? So there's a lot of questions to go on here. It really depends as to whether it ends up being like more simplified or more sort of thing. And also there's kind of a question as to whether or not it'll be designed for digital, with a digital component, which hasn't been announced yet, or whether it will be in person only. If it has a digital component, then it will be one turn player is active and the other player isn't, because that's just a hallmark of clean digital design. And in fact, it's very likely to be that way anyway, because this game is being designed for kids. So it's very, very easy for me to have my turn and then you to have your turn, and there to be very limited windows of interaction on those 2 turns. It makes it a lot more straightforward, right? So I very much expect it will go in a play pattern like this, where I go first. I'm the first player to act. I will place 1 of cards in my resources. I'll do something that costs 1. You, as the second player, don't get to get 2 resources on your first turn and get to play something that costs 2. And then it's my turn and I can play something that costs 3. And then you get to play something that costs 4. And in that way, neither of us is really getting an advantage. It's actually quite interesting, because one of the problems the most land-based games have is that I go first, you go second, which means I play my first 1-drops always before yours. But actually in this situation, I'm playing my 1-drop, you're playing your 2-drop, I'm playing my 3-drop. Things get much more interesting, because technically the active player is always outscaling, and trading up becomes then very important, right? And that's the act of basically my 1-drop has to be able to beat your 2-drop, or otherwise I'm losing the board to your 2-drop. Unless they knock each other out. We might see that a little bit from the stats of these cards. So the 1-drop is a 1-2. The 2-drop is a 1-3. So these won't actually knock each other out. The 3-drop is a 2-3. So Elsa could beat Captain Hook. But Captain Hook, if I get my turn back, can beat Elsa, right? Then we have these 2 which are just doing their own thing because they're 6. We don't have a 4 or a 5 to compare. But you can kind of see how the game would play out. If I play my Captain Hook turn 1, assuming it has some sort of summoning sickness, you play your Elsa turn 2 and you can't tap it because of summoning sickness, then my Captain Hook can kill your Elsa unless you have some sort of response. Now, we don't know when these ink pot cards untap. I assume it's at the start of your turn. It's also kind of implying that you're going to refill your hand at the start of your turn. But this refill phase could very easily be at the end of the turn as well, right? That would mean that player 1... No, because then you skip the first 2 turns of the game. So we're going to assume that the turn starts with you being able to discard a card and then draw back up to a certain number of cards. Because it's a refill phase. So you can kind of assume maybe there's a bit of hand drawing there, where if I have less than 7, I can draw back up. Anyway, that's kind of where we are on the speculation. I'm actually kind of low-key excited for Lorcana. It's always really interesting to me when a big, huge company gets invested in designing a card game, because they're actually less incentivized to go off the deep end and make interesting game design. But what they are incentivized to do is heavily streamline the game that they design, right? So they're not incentivized to do what Flesh and Blood did, which is build a whole new system and work out a whole new resource system and make things really innovative, because they're not getting kudos for how innovative it is. They're getting kudos for whether people can play the game and understand it very easily. So it's their job actually to find the simplest recipe they can, i.e. copy something like Magic the Gathering, or copy something like My Hero Academia, the Versailles system, or copy, something like that. Take that idea, streamline it to hell, and then focus really on just making the gameplay super smooth through cards, through stuff like this ink idea instead of land, so you're avoiding mana screw, and then just make the cards really impactful, really like full of flavor. Really make people feel like they've got that character in play. Like Robin Hood is evasive because he's an evasive character who is always hiding and running away. He's drawing cards because he's stealing from the rich when your opponent has more cards from you. Like, fill the characters full of flavor, make the gameplay as simple as possible with a little bit of complexity to challenge people, and then just people will buy it and have fun playing it, and you don't have to worry so much about being innovative and edgy. So I'm actually really excited about Lorcana. It's not out until next year. I'm not part of any of their content creator programs, but maybe I can be. That would be really fun. And that's it. I just wanted to do a video on the speculation. I find when I'm looking at a game like this, I find the choices they make, because this is it, right? So when you're looking at an indie game, and this is the point I'll end on, when you're looking at an indie game, when you're looking at a Kickstarter game, they have to be innovative. They have to try new things. They have to be edgy. And sometimes that goes wrong. When you're looking at a game like this, the choices are so much more important because they have so much more money spent on development, right? That when they choose to make or use a system that already exists, but innovate it a little bit, those innovations are actually fascinating because they're really heavily play tested and they're really big decisions. So it actually becomes more interesting. So when a tiny like indie Kickstarter does a whole new system and stuff like that, that's fascinating because you get to see how new things work. But when a company like this makes these small changes to an existing system, that's when you get some really interesting sort of like design space because you couldn't expect it, right? At all. Yeah, that's it really. Yeah, that's it. I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm really excited for Lorcana. We'll see what else it does. If you know Disney or you are listening to this and you've never heard of me, I am a London-based TCG player. I obviously have the following that I have, and I have been playing TCGs since I was 10. I know a lot about TCGs. I'm really passionate about them. I'm very passionate about new card games. So if you work for Disney and you want to give me a hookup onto how I can get onto a press tour or something like that, I will be more than happy to get involved. Learning about new card games is fantastic. All right. Have a great day.